Welcome to Rags to Riches, the Ironman gear progression tailored specifically to completing the Chambers of Xerics challenge mode raid solo. From the scuffed early game Ironman gear to the endgame best in slot items, we will be recreating our gear progression by changing and upgrading gear between each raid that we complete. You don't need a twisted bow to begin doing challenge mode raids, but it certainly is a lot more fun when you do have one. Welcome to the 11th installment of the Rags to Riches series. We've come a long way since episode 1 where we began our Ironman challenge mode chambers journey in a mystic robe top. Here we are on episode 11 though with much different looking gear. If you're clicking into the series for the first time, I do encourage you to check out the full playlist just so you can experience the gear progression with me. Nevertheless, here on episode 11, we are in the August-September range of 2024, and this is the iteration of gear we had. You'll notice right away we had one massive upgrade, the Scythe of Vitter. And pulling this drop could not have come at a better time, because around this time was when Araxor was released, and we had to go farm some Araxor for a Amulet of Rancor, which we also acquired sometime in early September. Now, something I wasn't able to recreate just based on the gear I have now is that I started bringing the Eternal Boots into my raids, but I've since put them into my Avernic Treads, the Primordials, the Pegasians, and the Eternals, all three combined. So I don't have a spare pair of Eternal Boots laying around. So that is going to create a slight difference in my inventory. I will say now though, oftentimes entering Ulm, I would bank the Torva plate legs just so I had room for the Eternal Boots. A little bit later in September, we managed to acquire the Bellator ring. Now, before the existence of Oathplate and the Avernic Treads and all this fancy new gear, the Bellator ring was 100% the best in slot ring for solo CMs. Alright, without wasting any more time, let's get started on the raid I already pre-potted with my trusty chugging barrel, which is a nice quality of life item. I'm unsure of whether or not that existed at this time. I'd have to fact check. When did mixology exist? Anyways, let's get started here. Can we land the second hammer? We cannot. So in this iteration, we want to be putting our Scythe of Vitter on accurate here. Because Oathplate didn't exist, we're still wearing the Torva. We're still in that Torva era. Which honestly, these days, I kind of miss. Full blood Torva just looks very nice. Although I will say though, recently I did do some Theater of Blood with some clanmates. They were wearing Oathplate and I was playing on another account, my main account, that doesn't have Oathplate at this point in time. And it was a little out of place seeing everybody else with Oathplate and I had Torva. Okay, we were so busy talking that I was not properly in cycle here. And honestly, the DPS seems a little tragic right now. I guess this is just in comparison to Oathplate though. So if anything, this run right here, being in full Torva with the Scythe now, we can really feel how strong Oathplate has become. And how integral it is in the raid. Well, that was a huge EXP drop there. But yes, having a Scythe of Vitter now and in Torva, and let's just pretend like we have the Primordial Boots instead of the Avernic Treads on. With a Bellator ring, during this era, putting your Scythe on accurate for Tecton and Vanguards later was the strategy. It's actually slightly better DPS. Okay, good swing there to finish Tecton off. Let's get the Overload and Enhance. I did bring an Angler with me just to heal back up a little bit, which honestly was a good call considering we were making a few mistakes there. The setup is looking real strange at this point during this time because, well, we managed to get Max Mage pretty early on, actually. With the exception of the Shadow, which was maybe a month or two before the site. And then we managed to get our hands on the site, and at this point, like I said, Torva was the de facto best in slot melee gear. So now in the setup, we have Max Melee and Max Mage, but our range setup is still very much looking the same. The only only range, I should say, only range upgrade I've gone over the last few months and earlier in 2024 was really the Xeric Van Braces. If you exclude the spec weapons like the ZCB, that is actually pretty massive, but the core range setup, the only difference has been the Xeric Van Braces. So we're gonna scav here like usual. Honestly, I should probably be using my Bofa instead, but we're okay. We're gonna need a little bit more supplies, a little bit more secondaries than what dropped there. Let's drop the potions to make some room, though. There we go. That's still not quite enough, unfortunately. We need a little bit more juice. Show me the juice. But yeah, between episode 10 and now this one, it had been exciting times in late 2024. Getting 2 mega rare weapons after going for who knows how long of not obtaining the twisted bow that we tried so hard to get. We just left for other raids, other content in the game, and we just got so much more. Unfortunately, though, still no twisted bow at this point in time. But obviously, with the scythe acquired and the shadow acquired, we returned the chambers and we continued to go after the coveted twisted bow. Oh, I was not expecting that tree to break right there. Also, I think I did mention this in the previous episodes, but I'll say it again. Currently, I'm wearing a regular Inferno cape, but I most definitely was already maxed, and I was probably maxed, you know what? I don't quite remember when exactly I maxed that account, but I was definitely maxed for a while already. I will say, though, at this point in time on this account, I only had the one Inferno cape, so I didn't get started on a second Inferno KC until I did acquire the Twisted Bow. And at the time of this recording, I now have 4 or 5 Inferno KC on the account. Alright, one final inventory, just chopping as much as we can here at Ice Demon. There we go. Let's withdraw things out of our private storage here. And we can actually bank most things. So just like when we first acquired the Shadow, we go for a hammer spec, and then we swap into our range gear, or our mage gear, sorry. And we just employ this method of doing Ice Demon. Again, just want to reiterate that this was in the August-September of 2024, sometime in that timeline, that time frame. So, Ice Demon was not weak to Demon Bane weapons, and at the time, while Gothic Sleeps and the Emberlight and all that may not have existed, I don't think. And even if it did, like I said, Ice Demon was not actually weak to Demon Bane, so not even an Arc Light would have been good here. Couple more hits here, and I just realized I haven't summoned my Thrall, but it feels a little late now to do that. So we just won't bother, we'll just try to finish off Ice Demon. There we go. So despite having max mage, with this setup, the calculations at the time, assuming we were just wearing Eternal Boots or Primordials, the Bofa setup is actually better DPS on Shamans than the Tunic Shadow. We're going to go ahead and ZCB spec here. Unfortunately, it misses, so why did we bother at all? I don't know. But we have the Shaman safe spotted, so we can just chill here. Our damage output's not looking so great right now, though. Especially as an Ironman, or even just the main account currently in the mid-game era, or just like trying to get into the end game, the Bofa setup, the crystal armor, the Bofa setup is very, very good. But once you get your hands on a twisted bow, the Bofa starts to feel a little underwhelming, but I guess that's just the nature of power creep. But don't get me wrong, you know, I did hundreds. If you include regular KCs at chambers here, I definitely did over 1,000 chambers with the Bofa. But once I got my hands on that twisted bow, it just, you know, using the crystal armor and the Bofa just doesn't quite feel the same. Our prayer situation not looking too good here. I'm not actually sure why we are so low, but we may have to tank a hit here. Please be humble. Oh, actually, it threw a bomb, so that's pretty humble, actually. The prayer enhance was going, though, so we got a little bit prayer back. Alright, let's pick up the seeds. And just like the previous 10 episodes, we're going to be prepping the same exact way. We're going to prep the same exact way every single time. There's a, let's just coin it, a golden ratio, for at least for us, on how we can quickly and consistently prep. So we're going to put away the spade and the pots, deposit everything else, take the spade back out. We're going to need 13 juice and 8 mushrooms. Inventory full of vials, drop 4 of them, because that puts us at exactly 21 vials in our inventory, and we're going to be making 13 juice, 8 mushrooms, simple math right there, 21 vials. Once we have the 21 vials filled with water, we're going to put 10 away into shared storage temporarily. Then we're going to begin picking up Buchus. We're going to need 8 to make 8 revitalizations. So just a couple more here. There we go. So let's go ahead and make the 8 revits. Those are done with. We're going to take the 10 vials we previously stored away back out into our inventory. And now we are in a position where we have 13 water vials in our inventory, and we have exactly 13 inventory spaces available for all the Buchu we need. Now, especially as our gear has gone better and better, the 13 brew to 8 restore ratio is definitely an over prep. But I chose to consistently do this anyways, because sometimes you just make mistakes, sometimes you unfortunately plank, and just accounting for RNG as well, it just covers all the bases. And as I explained right there and showcased right there, this 13 brew 8 restore ratio is just very easy to prep, and I've done this thousands of times by now, so I just don't have to think too much about the prep, really. Anyways, on to Vanguards here. Let's gear up. And then get our Overload, Enhance. 1 restore and 2 brews should do the trick. Now, in this setup, the Bofa is actually a little redundant here. A little useless at Vanguards. That's because the Mage setup is actually better than the Bofa setup on on the Mage Vanguard here, which you would typically want to range. But the Shadow is better DPS than the Bofa. Fumbled our switches a little bit here, but let's make sure we have our Rancor on now for the melee. Again, as I mentioned at Tecton, you want to put your sights on accurate for this specific situation. You can see right there, you know, pretty big hit with the Shadow on the Mage Vanguard. The Shadow is just that strong. Alright, we're gonna step under the Ranger here and focus on the other ones. We don't want to run the risk of resetting the Vanguards. That would be very unfortunate. And a bit of a waste of time if that happens. Our prayer's a little low, so let's just keep an eye out on that. Now, I do believe our Scythe max hit is somewhere in the mid-80s, but with the way the Scythe works, it's very, very unlikely to hit that kind of number, so we do kind of chance the reset a little bit. I will say it has happened a few times where my Scythe just does an absolute nuclear hit. At that point, it is what it is, you know? But if it's like 70 health, it's kind of hard-pressed not to go for the swing there. I suppose we did bring our entire range setup just so we had a little bit better accuracy on the ZCB. Plus we can afford the inventory space anyways. We're almost done with Vanguards here. Unfortunately, it digs, so that's just more time added. We're going to drop the Overload Enhance here because we're going to get a fresh new set upon completion of Vanguards here. Both our health and prayer is a little low here, so let's just keep an eye on that. No silly deaths would be ideal. Okay, that's Vanguards over and done with. We're going to make sure we want to pick up an Enhance and Overload, and then just as many brews and restores as we can. Usually we have enough space, but I did have to chug one of the brews right there. I'm going to go ahead and sip this Enhance to make room so I can start picking up the grubs along the way to the chest. Sipping that Enhance, that should last us through the Thieving Room, and most importantly, Vespula. And at Vespula, we'll be getting yet another Overload and Enhance there anyways. So when you're running solo CMs, it just seems like you're going to get those supply drops everywhere, and it's kind of really just preference on when you want to, you know, refresh your Overload and Enhance, but you'll definitely have plenty to work with. Couple more grubs here, and then we'll sort our inventory out in preparation for the rest of floor 2 and floor 3 actually. So just for, you know, like organization's sakes, we're going to bank all the pots actually. In private, we need our pickaxe, a stamina, and we'll take back out the Overload, and mostly restores in our inventory. We'll grab the one brew just for emergency purposes and healing back up after Vespula. So with the run energy changes that they implemented, honestly, the stamina pot to get through the regular rooms in the challenge mode raid are unnecessary. It's not really necessary anymore, but we're just gonna go ahead and sip that just in case. Open up Vespula with a ZCB spec, and then we're gonna be shadowing it. Something I overlooked is that our Overload is about to expire in 15 seconds. It's not exactly ideal to have to re-overload in the middle of the Vespula room, just because of the nature of you proccing Redemption sitting low health. But if you do find yourself in a position where you need to overload, Just know that, oh, well, you know, can't really showcase it there because I just finished off the Vespula portal. But you can stand on this tile over here safely for a few seconds so that you can let your overload tick. Alright, we're going to pick up all those potions, so we just got a quick refresher of the overload and enhance, as I mentioned. And I suppose, going back to my conversation about the stamina potion being not needed, I suppose you could still bring one if you are trying to go fast, you know? But if you're trying to be stingy, don't use the stamina potions. So we're going to put away some of these restores. We do not need 3 restores right now. I instinctively swap back into my range gear, but really, in this setup here, we're going to be shadowing tightrope. Let's make sure we get our Thrall going. We did not summon a Thrall at Vespula, as the Thrall actually can't reach the portal. With a 5-tick weapon, and you're doing tightrope regularly, as in you're going to be finishing off these majors and rangers, you do want to step back out of range so that you just trade 1-to-1 hits with both the rangers and the rangers alike. If with the 4-tick weapon, you really can just, you know, just stand in range and auto-attack them. But this method here with the 5-tick weapon, it'll help you preserve your health and take a little bit less damage. Those are the majors done with. The majors don't do an incredible amount of damage, but these rangers definitely have the potential to do so. So when you tackle the rangers here, you want to flick into some range defense in between your own hits. And honestly, you also have to brew pretty constantly. Because of how hard-hitting tightrope mobs are, this is the reason why most people elect... Well, I shouldn't say most people, I don't know if that's actually true, but people do elect to tightrope skip in the interest of saving their supplies and just doing the raid quicker. But tightrope skip is really only a method when you're truly going for some speedruns, and even in the case of a Grandmaster time that you might be going for, you do not need to tightrope skip by any stretch of the imagination. Although that may be dependent on the gear you have. Anyways, that's the rangers done. Let's cross the tightrope. And our enhance actually expired at some point. I was not paying attention to that. Let's get that going again. If you're an Ironman or just a main trying to do some money raids, I would probably just do tightrope the regular way, just as I did. Alright, we're going to swap in our melee gear here with the pickaxe equipped. And we're going to do a slight compromise here in the interest of inventory space. We're going to bank the crystal helmet. We're going to sip the stamina pot. And then bank that as well. And then we will make sure to fill our inventory up with brews. Again, going back to the conversation about the stamina changes, back then, sipping the stamina was pretty crucial to make sure I had enough stamina to get through Guardians and Vasa. So we still aren't going to be using our Bofa setup here for Vasa, as far as I know, you can't actually use any other style against Vasa. So back then, Vasa was a lot tankier and it had higher defense as well. So in a Bofa setup, it was doable, but it was pretty much guaranteed like a minimum of 2 teleports before I would finish Vasa. It is what it was, you know, I kind of accepted some of the downsides to doing solo CMs early without max gear. I definitely favored the consistency and the low supply usage. As in, you know, all it really took for me to do a solo CM was some crystal charges in my armor, charges in my trident, my shadow, and whatnot, and just like 1 super divine combat. As an Ironman, that really played in my favor. And the raid drops a ton of herbs, and more recently, drops a ton of herbs and seeds. So I was able to build up a nice supply of potions and secondaries and herbs and whatnot just from doing solo CMs. So we just had to re-overload right there, and that's actually pretty good timing because we're going to be dropping the overload to make sure we have room to de-equip our pickaxe and a Vernic Defender. And then we will be getting a fresh new overload after we finish Vasa. So with the Crystal Helm banked, we are going to lose a little DPS here at Vasa, but in the name of having enough brews to get through this entire floor 3, specifically for the Muddled Out room, it's a fair trade-off. So yeah, we're going to be dropping the overload. We're done with Guardians now. And these days there is a Vasa teleport skip technique here, but we're just not going to do that right now. Instead, we'll just brew up. Go for the ZCB hit that unfortunately misses. And yeah, the both is not exactly hitting right now. Very unfortunate. So right here, we're actually going to want to put our sights back on the slash, both for these Vasa crystals and for when we get to Ulm. Okay, hopefully our Bofa starts to do a little bit more damage here. Fun fact, if you ever find yourself in a position to where you need to run through Vasa, protecting melee does reduce the trample damage a little bit. Okay, DPS has been better than the initial couple hits. Oh, we're gonna... Okay, I thought I was gonna tank a hit there. We're fine. We're gonna have to run over to this crystal. We might experience a teleport here, unless we can get absolutely nuclear sight hits. It's not looking like the case, though. And with the Bofa, I don't think we're going to be dealing 134 damage before it reaches the center. So there's a teleport right there. Again, I cannot stress this enough. The Vasa room used to take much, much longer than it is now. Oh, that is quite tragic. It's about 10 health, but we have to deal with the crystal. So we just resummoned our Thrall there, and it gave us a timer of 2 minutes, and I believe that was 22 seconds on our Thrall, which is absolutely insane. That is the previously Grandmaster Thrall time, but now it's available for Master tier players as well, which is where I'm at. I'm a Master Combat Achievement haver at this point in time. So at the end of Vasa there, in order to make room, I did sip my Enhance and then drop it. That way I could pick up the 2 brews and the overload. We will be getting another Enhance back at Muddled before we enter Ulm. So from the moment we got our hands on the Tunican Shadow, we no longer bring the Salve Amulet, and instead we use Max Mage here to handle the Mystics. I think these days, regardless of your setup, whether you have a Twisted Bow or not, the Tunican Shadow in combination with the Avernic Treads, the Confliction Gauntlets, and all that good stuff, I think it actually does out DPS the range setup with a salve. I could be incorrect on that. Someone could fact check me or correct me on that, but For us specifically here, we are simply just using the mage setup, not because it's better DPS necessarily, but just in the interest of inventory space. So entering Muttadal here, we're going to make sure we're going to get as high health as we can. And as we chop the tree, we're also going to make sure we sit at high health because, well, you could get comboed out pretty easily between the baby Muttadal and the mama Muttadal in the water while you're chopping the tree. We're going to be picking up the axe there. Which is one of the many changes they've made in Chambers of Xerics over the years. Previously, an axe spawn did not exist in the Muttadal room, and if you wanted to do solo CMs, or just CMs in general, you'd have to keep your bronze axe from Ice Demon all the way up until this point. I mentioned the insane amount of damage that you could potentially take at Muttadal, and you just saw it right there. I think I saw a couple of 50s and stuff. Sometimes Muttadal's just a pain, you know? Like, it's standing right next to us in melee range, yet it ranges us for massive damage. So we're done with chopping the tree, and what we're going to do here is we're going to be shadowing the baby here. We're going to summon her thrall as well. In between hits, we're going to step under and also flick in the tank here. Just so we can try to minimize the damage we take. Okay. Into our range gear here, we're going to open up with a ZCB spec. Let's keep an eye out on our health. 42 is quite low for being in a Muttadal room. Little loss of DPS here as we brew early, but I'd rather be alive and lose a little DPS than have to lose all my points, or half my points more precisely, and then make the run back here. That would be quite painful, so we're gonna do our best to avoid that scenario. All things considered here, the Muttadal was pretty humble. We took not that much damage. Okay, temporarily equip our defender and pickaxe just to make sure we have enough room. And then as we run towards Ulm, let's organize our inventory here a little bit. Make sure things are where they need to be. Everything we don't need for Ulm, we're going to drag to the bottom of our inventory. Let's hit the stamina pool here, the energy well. And another change they made over the years is that there are storage units down here now, so you can pre-pot and get geared up for the Ulm fight down here rather than upstairs. Okay, so let's get rid of the axe, pickaxe, defender. We don't need that. We're not bringing the ZCB in. We definitely need our Elder Maw. And then what we should have done was actually preemptively swap into our melee setup. That way we can bank the Bofa right away. And another little mistake here that I should have taken care of in the beginning is rearrange our inventory to where the mage gear is at the top of our inventory. We're slow to gear up here. This was not the case back then. We were very accustomed to our setups. But keep in mind here, our setup is changing from raid to raid constantly. So everything just looks slightly different to me every single run. Okay, we are ready, so let's overload and enhance. I will say though, I think I mentioned this at the beginning of the raid, because we have the Avernic Treads, which is a combination of all the Cerberus boots, we actually have an extra inventory space with us right now. Back then, we would bring both the Primordials and the Eternals, And when we entered Ulm, we would drop the Torva pants into private storage to make room for the boot switches. So that's a little inaccuracy right there. Because if we didn't bank the Torva plate legs, we would only have space for 4 brews, which over my many runs, many solo CMs, I kind of calculated that 5 brews was the sweet spot for me. If I had less than 5 brews, things would get very sketchy, and it would just come down to RNG. But 5 was just the perfect amount. While we are using the Avernic Treads from the Duma Mocha here, we actually are still using the Tormented Bracelets, which is accurate for its time. Again, the purpose of this series is to recreate the gear setups we had back then to the best of our abilities. Us being an Ironman, we can't just get everything, unfortunately. Some things we no longer have. Just making sure to turn the head right now so that we can get situated here and get into cycle. So this is actually the first Rags to Riches video here where we're using the scythe at Ulm, which means a different method. We're going to be 3-to-1ing the hand here, and I mentioned this because I actually haven't been able to get into cycle here on the melee hand because I've instinctively done the 4-to-1 method, and I'm actually still doing it right now. But yeah, we'll try to fix that on P2, but without even thinking about it, I was just trying to 4-to-1, which doesn't work with a 5-tick weapon. Somebody just got their hands on the Antler Guard. Congratulations. So right there, us instinctively going for the 4-to-1 melee strategy there, even though we have a scythe, that's just one of the many issues or challenges that I've come up upon through this Rags to Riches series, which is not something I really thought about, but a lot of the raid running just comes down to muscle memory. So when we build up certain muscle memories, for certain strategies, and then having to break it, it definitely throws me for a loop. I think I messed up there. Yeah. That should not have been a long range attack right there. Couple more hits here. That should do the trick. That was a chance right there. Unless I got that brew off in time, I'm not actually quite sure. Okay, we are using the Scythe Emitter, so let's do the 3-to-1 method here. Just saying that out loud to remind myself. There we go. We should be in cycle. That's a very humble mage 0 there. Our enhanced ran out, so let's get that going again. And our overload's about to run out as well. And that prayer drain put our prayer very low. So let's sip the restore. So obviously the main focus here has been the acquisition of the site, but I cannot underestimate the newfound power of the Amulet of Rancor in comparison to the Torture. It is a massive, massive upgrade in that regard, as well as the Bellator ring. So I guess in this episode, the upgrades have been very melee focused more than anything else. Honestly, with the Bellator ring, while your hammer accuracy is a little bit lower than, say, if you were to use an Ultor ring, which, by the way, at this time, we did not have an Ultor. But even if we did, as I mentioned before, the Bellator is actually the better option with this current setup of gear. But as I was saying about the Bellator ring, before the existence of the Bellator ring, it would honestly be quite painful if you didn't land hammers on the melee hand. But with the Bellator ring and the Amulet Rancor, really, it's not the worst thing when your hammer doesn't land. You still end up doing a decent amount of damage. Okay, we have not been running the mage hand correctly. Throughout the series, I've mentioned a couple of times, it really is an added difficulty to, I guess, commentate these runs and do them with the ever-changing gear from raid to raid. Okay, I'm trying to get into cycle here. Let's make the head turn. So even when you're not in cycle and you might be struggling to get in cycle, honestly, the most important thing here is to try and get the head turning. Just so the damage you take, you know, you're still trying to reduce the amount of hits you're taking. At 42 health here, I'm going to choose to brew. The max hit is a 43, and despite how unlikely that might actually happen to get hit a 43 when you're exactly at 43, that actually has happened to me a fair bit, so I'm just a bit afraid of that happening. So we're not chancing it. And honestly, with the gear being so strong now, with the Torva and the Bellator ring, Amulet Rancor, the list goes on, we clearly did not execute the melee hand there very well, but we were doing so much damage there anyways, it did not matter. So transitioning into the head phase here, we're still rocking the Dragon Hunter crossbow. And it's actually not optimal to be in crystal gear. We would probably want Missouri or even Arma at this stage, but you know, we need to still be using the crystal set for the Bofa. An absolute ton of crystals falling down right now. I feel like more than usual, strangely enough. I don't know what's going on. We are very brewed down right now. Unfortunately, we're actually out of restores. Our prayer drained quite a bit on this run. Another thing is, I would very much appreciate a Ruby proc right about now, although it's getting kind of late and maybe we don't want those anymore. So we are now completely out of supplies, so I think what I'm going to do here in order to try and survive is I'm going to transition into 2 to 0. We are going to have to miss a few hits here to get into cycle. But yeah, we're going to have to 2 to 0 just for a couple of hits here in the name of surviving. This has not been the most ideal run. 43 minutes is definitely quite slow considering the gear we have. But again, I'd just like to reiterate. Oh my goodness, we get a purple ancestral robe top. That is big money right there. That was 146 mil. Let's take a look at our collection log here. I believe that is our 90... Actually, let's count here, you know? That is our 93rd purple on this Ironman account. That is our 4th ancestral robe top. I believe I have dropped some dupes over just for GP, so we don't actually have 4 on the account right now. But we definitely have 2. We have 2 in our inventory right now. And we actually have the spare kits to put onto that ancestral robe top if we really wanted to. But to close out this video, as I was saying before we got rudely interrupted by getting a purple, imagine that, this was not the most optimal run. 43 minutes is definitely very slow for the gear setup that we are running with. But I really want to stress that, you know, I'm having trouble adapting from setup to setup as we make changes. With the way Chambers is ran, inventory management is very important. And when you don't know where things are, or you're not looking for the right things in your inventory, it can be kind of confusing and really slow you down. On top of that, I'm doing my best to do the commentary here, and you know, I don't want to just sit here in silence and do the raid, so that's also affecting me too. But you know, in hindsight, that all sounds like a bunch of excuses. We are rewarded with an ancestral robe top. This has been the 11th installment of the Rags to Riches series. We will catch you guys on the next one, in which I think we will be catching up to our setup that we currently have in real time. With all that being said, this has been episode 11 of Rags to Riches, and I hope to see you in the next episode.